Jungkook's eyes never left Vine's face, searching for a glimmer of emotion, a hint of forgiveness. But her expression remained steadfast, a mask of indifference that pierced his heart. He reached out, his hand hovering over hers, hesitant to break the silence. Vine, please, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I know I hurt you, but I can't bear the thought of losing you. You're my everything. Vine's gaze finally shifted, her eyes locking onto his. But instead of warmth, they held a cold, hard glint. You should have thought of that before you pushed me away, Jungkook, she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. He knew he had hurt her, but he had never intended to push her away, not truly. He opened his mouth to apologize again, but Vine's words cut him off. You need to know that this was never how I liked to be protected, she said with vulnerable eyes. You're not protecting me, Jungkook. You're scaring me. From yourself. The words hung in the air like a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down. Vine, just leave me alone for some time. Jungkook's heart raced as he realized the depth of his mistakes, the fragility of their love. He nodded, his eyes never leaving hers, his soul screaming with regret. I will wait, he whispered. I will wait forever if that's what it takes. As Jungkook turned to leave, the weight of Vine's words settled upon him like a shroud. He felt the gravity of his mistakes, the fragility of their love, and the depths of her pain. His heart raced with regret as he nodded. He walked out of the room, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. The door creaked shut behind him, and he stood in the hallway, his chest heaving with emotion. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her, of living without her by his side. As he entered the kitchen, his eyes scanned the room, searching for a distraction from the pain that was hammered at his heart. His gaze landed on a glass of water on the counter, and in a fit of rage and regret, he threw it off the counter, shattering it on the floor. The sound of shattering glass was cathartic, and he felt a momentary release of tension. But it wasn't enough. He grabbed another glass, and another, hurling them to the floor with a ferocity that left him breathless. The sound of breaking glass was followed by the sound of his anguished cry, echoing off the kitchen walls. He sank to his knees, surrounded by the shards of broken glass, his hands trembling with emotion and bleeding red. Thinking that the kitchen was downstairs and her room door was locked, Jungkook knew that the voices wouldn't reach her. But Vine still heard some unknown noises, unsure about where they were coming from. She went downstairs, all calm in her heart, just to check what it was, and her eyes widened in horror as she took in the scene before her. Jungkook knelt on the ground between the broken pieces of glasses, his hands covered in blood, pieces of glass still embedded in his skin. She shouted his name as she rushed to his side, her heart racing with fear and concern, her world turning upside down. Jungkook, oh my God, what have you done? She exclaimed, her voice trembling as she took his bleeding hand in her trembling hand. Jungkook looked at her. Her face and eyes didn't contain anything else than worry and tension about himself. Her hands were trembling as she constantly looked at his hands, not knowing what to do. He looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed, his face contorted in anguish. "I couldn't bear the thought of losing you, Vine," he whispered, his voice crackling with emotion. "I love you. I love you so much." Vine looked at him with annoyance as she raised her voice at him, maybe for the first time in her life, as long as she remembers. "Is this how you prove your love to me? You're such an idiot," she said as tears welled up in her eyes. Jungkook, "I deserve it, Vine. I deserve to suffer for what I did to you. Please forgive me." His eyes shed tears and his voice trembled as he said that. "Vine, sorry isn't enough, Jungkook. You need to forgive yourself too." She looked deep in his eyes as she asked him sincerely to forgive himself. Jungkook, "I can't, Vine. I don't deserve your forgiveness or your love." Vine's expression softened, her eyes filling with tears. She knelt beside him, her hands gently cupping his face. "I'm so sorry, Jungkook," she whispered, "for making you think like that. I think I took it too far with my anger. I'm really sorry." Her eyes still on his face in her hands. Jungkook looked in her eyes for some seconds and then hugged him tightly. He dug his face in her shoulder and shed tears. "Jungkook, I love you so much," he whispered. "You're the best person I could have ever met." "Vine, I love you too, Jungkook," her voice trembling with emotions as she wrapped her arms around his waist, tightly hugging him back. "So don't say it one more time that you don't deserve me. You're the only person I can imagine my future with." Jungkook, "But I can't forgive myself. What if I'd lost you, Vine? What if that accident had taken you away from me?" His heart trembled and hurt, as if a hammer was thrown at it again and again, and it swelled as the thought of losing her occurred in his heart. Vine patted his head. "Don't think about it, Jungkook. We're together now, and that's all that matters." Jungkook broke the hug and looked at her injuries. He rubbed his hand across her bare arm, which had a long cut on it. He rubbed his hand on her cut and said, "I promise to make it up to you, Vine. I will spend the rest of my life making you happy." Vine collided her head with his and looked in his eyes. "Just love me, Jungkook. That's all I need." As Vine carefully removed the glass shards from his hands, Jungkook felt a wave of pain wash over him, but it was nothing compared to the ache in his heart. "Vine, don't do anything like that again, or I will actually leave you." Jungkook shook his head. "I won't. I promise." A moment of silence, their eyes locked, their heart beating in sync, and then they kissed. As their lips met, the world around them melted away, leaving only the two of them, lost in the depths of their love. The kiss was soft, yet passionate, a gentle contrast of the flame that had flickered but never died. Jungkook's hands, still trembling with emotion, cradled Vine's face, his fingers tracing the curves of her cheeks, as if to reassure himself that she was real, that he didn't lose her because of himself. Vine's arms wrapped around his waist, her fingers digging into his back as she pulled him closer, deepening the kiss. Their lips moved in perfect sync, their breathing synchronized, their hearts beating as one. The kiss was an apology, a forgiveness, a promise, and a declaration of love, all rolled into one. As they pulled back, gasping for air, their eyes locked, and they knew that nothing could ever break the bond between them again. The kiss had sealed their love, had healed the wounds, and had promised a forever filled with love, laughter, and tears of joy. Jungkook's eyes shone with tears, his face contorted with emotion, as he whispered, "I love you, Vine," he said as he collided his head with hers once again. Vine's eyes sparkled with tears, her voice barely above a whisper. "I love you too, Jungkook."